Hello and welcome to another episode of the Haxton Knits YouTube channel. My name is Deanna and I am an American living in Okinawa, Japan. This week I have a little bit of a short episode for you, and the reason for that is I have some new equipment and a little bit of a new setup here, and so I really just wanted to pop in, make a really quick video, and then I can really spend some time playing with my new toys and editing and hopefully getting used to this new setup. So since I saw you last, I celebrated a birthday, and as part of a birthday present, my husband purchased a GoPro for me. And you guys, if you watch this channel, you probably know that I'm not much of a videographer. Video skills, I do very much everything on a budget setup. And the reason is, I have a lot of hobbies. I do a lot of hobbies, and some of my hobbies, especially the home brewing, can be pretty, what you see me point back this way. I'm pointing back to where I do my home brewing, which is downstairs in my bathroom, so useless point there. But that particular hobby can be quite a money suck because it's so fun to buy all the equipment and accessories, and every time you brew you think, oh, how could I make this day easier and less challenging. And of course the knitting is also a not unsubstantially expensive hobby at times, between the spinning wheel and the loom and all the yarn and all the fibers, and you know how it goes. So it's always been my goal on this channel to do everything as cheaply as possible, as budget friendly as possible. For weeks I've been sort of scouring the Craigslist, not really Craigslist, but here in Okinawa it's called Okinawa yard sales, looking for used cameras. And even, used cameras, they're so expensive, and there's so much that I don't know, like video equipment's unfamiliar to me. I really ought to take some sort of a class and get better at that. But my husband has been watching me do all this, and on my birthday he did find a secondhand GoPro that had been discounted. So we're just playing around with this format and seeing how it goes. I have the GoPro Max, which is pretty cool. It does like 360 footage, and so you can pause and redirect the camera and continue. There's a lot of cool things you can do with it. But first I have to figure out how to do that. So that's the reason for this light episode today. Let's get started. I have no finished objects for you this week, but I do have a few whips and new cast-ons, so let me share with you what I have. First of all, I promised you guys last week that I would cast on something using my Handspun yarn, and it has happened. So finally, after much ado, I have cast on the Night Shift, which is a Andrea Mowry pattern, which is a shawl. So she does a cowl, a shawl, a sweater, and a hat, all in this particular stitch pattern. And in hers she uses spin cycle yarn, which is a beautiful yarn that I think mimics the way a lot of hand spun yarn looks in the way the color progresses. And I don't know what it is that makes hand spun yarn look so distinct with its color changes, in a way that I haven't seen done in commercial yarn. But this one, spin cycle yarn really does a good job of that. So when I saw her pattern using this yarn, I instantly thought of my own hand spun yarn and was super excited to cast this on. So hopefully you guys can see this guy. I am hoping to make this shawl very, very, very large. And of course, as triangular shaped shawls go, you start out at this nice little end here and start to grow. So in the beginning, this goes very quickly, and then all of a sudden you sort of hit a point where the rows start to stall, and it takes longer and longer and longer to get through rows. So this will probably be a pretty long project. I anticipate this will end up being my car project and will sit around for a long time before I get it finished. But I'm in love with it. It looks so great. I have had to do a little bit of playing around with my needle size since my handspun yarn does vary in thickness quite a bit. As you guys know, I am not a super advanced spinner, and so some of my yarns are a little thicker, some of them are a little thinner. When I started, the main color that I used was actually a 3-ply yarn, whereas all the rest of mine is a 2-ply yarn. And so I did start at a little bit of a higher needle size. What did I start on? So I'm currently using a US size 5 3.75 millimeter, and I think I started on a 7, a US size 7. And that's okay. We'll just continue to play with it and use needle sizes that match the gauge or the size of the yarn that I'm using. I'm super excited to see how this turns out. So let me tell you a little bit about these yarns. I did some close-up shots of these, which may show up better than me holding them up. But the first yarn I used, so this was my main color yarn, and this one is the 3-ply, and I will have to put on the bottom of the screen here what each of these are, because I definitely don't remember them from memory. But this was just a beautiful blue, green, and brown spectrum that I spun ages ago. I can't even tell you how long ago I spun this. So very excited. This is gonna be one of my main colors. I basically picked 3 main colors and then you know, a whole bunch of contrast colors based on what was sitting around. So main color number 1 was this section here. Main color number 2 is this beautiful green skein. I am totally digging this particular skein. There's something about the way these green colors play together, like the mint green and then the lime green. Just every time I hit those sort of mint and lime sections, I'm just absolutely in love with what I'm making. So very excited. It's been just a dream knitting up this section. And this is the yarn that I'm currently using. And this will be the 3rd main color. And this, of course, is more of a green and purple. So I think it'll be great. I can try to make the transition from this one to this one in one of the more green sections so that it kind of hides that transition a little bit. This is, of course, a simple slip stitch pattern. But I love that she kept the slip stitches pretty close together so that the back side doesn't have very long floats. I think the back side of these is even, you know, just as pretty as the front side of it. I keep reaching forward to turn on my display so I can see what I'm showing you. And I think that's about all I have to say about that. These are some of my little mini skeins of contrast colors that I have floating around. And we'll see how many of these I need to get into. This is some of the Frabjous fiber yarn that I was talking about in my last episode when I was going gaga and gushing over all the Frabjous fiber yarns. And this one, I don't know if it will make it into the cut or not. So this is the Nest Fiber Club again. This is their holiday December 2017 skein, and it was a superwash merino, and I do like it. It's a lot thinner spun, so this is closer to maybe a lace weight, whereas my other ones kind of vary between a fingering to almost worsted weight, depending on how even or uneven my spinning was. And this one, I don't know if this one will make it into the final object. We'll just have to see basically how much yarn I have when I get closer to the end of this project. For my next work in progress, this is for my Stubborn Stash knit-along that's going on through the end of October. Last week I talked to you about the ridiculous game of yarn chicken that I was playing, trying to use up this particular stash yarn. I had cast on a peplum cardigan and I had to call it. So I did indeed frog that entire cardigan. It actually wasn't as painful as it sounds because it is a super duper bulky yarn, and I decided to move on to another pattern. So I also decided to go digging into my old magazine stash for this particular pattern. So this is Vogue Knitting Winter 2005-2006. And this is what the cover of this guy looks like. And this, gosh, I have so many of these magazines that I just fell in love with something in them and held on to them forever, and for whatever reason never knit up the items I wanted to knit up. So when I started this make along with the goal of using up some of my stubborn stash, I posted over on the Ravelry group some of the patterns that I was considering, and this was one of them. This is not what I'm going to be making, but this was one of those patterns, and it's awesome. Just a beautiful, bulky, long sleeve sweater dress that I have no reason to even think about casting on here in the Okinawa heat. But also in this issue was this really interesting sort of crop top sweater. And what's interesting about this sweater is that you can wear it either like you see here as a V-neck sort of crop sweater, or you can flip it upside down and fold down this ribbing here and wear it as a sort of asymmetrical hem with a big folded collar. And I thought that was really interesting. And of course, here in Okinawa, I could just cut off those sleeves and wear it as a little bit of a top over maybe a tank top or like a little camisole or something like that. So that would be nice for the days where I know I'm going to be in and out of the house, and I might want a tank top for while I'm outside in the heat, and then be able to chuck that over the top. It would also, I think, look really cute over a little dress, as a lot of the crop sweaters are being styled right now. So I have cast that on, and this is another pattern where really, the yarn makes the pattern, and of course my yarn is not the yarn called for in the pattern, but this is what I have so far. I know it's not a lot to look at the moment. It's just a bunch of ribbing, and it seems like you cast on like this, make a long section of ribbing, and then repeat this shape over on the other side. And I'm just sort of following along with the pattern. I am not trying to overthink it or modify it or change anything, because I'm really just trying to use up this stash and get it out of the way. Here are my balls of yarn, which of course I told you about in previous episodes, are some very heavily discounted Lions brand yarn. I do think this is, what did I say, 80% acrylic? And despite that, I know I'm a yarn snob, despite that I'm really loving working with it, and I'm trying to figure out what it is about this yarn that makes it more enjoyable to knit with, even though it's got such a high acrylic content, which I usually find, I don't know, like not as pleasing to the hand. There's something just so special about the way wool feels when you're knitting it. And I think it's the kind of unusual construction of this yarn. So it's actually, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 plies of yarn. However, each of those plies is actually a 2-ply yarn. And so it's actually, I guess, 12 plies of yarn where they plied 2 strands together and then took 6 of those and plied them together. And I think that's probably sort of mimicking some of the bounce and memory and body that you get with wool and you don't get with acrylic. So it's actually been really pleasant to work with, and I'm surprised. I've been actually enjoying it quite a bit. All right, last but not least, this one isn't even a whip yet. It is just a future plan, but I mentioned in some of my previous episodes that I had bought this sock yarn. So this is Olympus Make Socks, and it is a Japanese made yarn, so made in Japan, and it's a single, so it's not a plied yarn. And let me see if I can read the fiber content. So it's knit on a Japanese size 5 to 6 needle, and it is 70% wool and 30% nylon, so it's the right kind of fiber blend, but it's a single. which I have not seen very many sock yarns that are a single. And so I went online onto Ravelry to see what other people made with it, and a lot of people had made socks. So I'm going to try to make some socks out of these. Like always here in Japan, all of the balls of yarn are teeny tiny little skeins. These are 25 grams. So I've got 2 of these and then just a little bit of leftover sock yarn from another project that's going to be contrasting heels, cuffs, and toes to make these little 25 gram balls go a little bit farther. So I'm very excited to cast those on. I found myself sort of trying to justify being allowed to cast on another project when I have so many on the needles right now. So if I am counting, I have my portage cardigan, which is downstairs in the car right now. I have the night shift shawl, which I just showed you. I have my great tapestry, which actually has been getting a lot of work lately, but there's just not really enough to show you. So we'll get back to that on another episode when I'm a little bit further along with that project. I have my Stubborn Stash make along, which is on the needles. I have a crochet blanket, and then I think that's it, but I'm like just dying to cast on. There's a blanket I want to cast on. There's a couple of summer tops I really want to cast on. So I got to sit down and do some serious knitting and stop playing around with all my other hobbies. And of course, part of this desire to cast on a bunch of new things is because I've been watching several new YouTube knitting channels. Right now, I am absolutely obsessed with the Heather and Hops YouTube channel, coming from, is it Hertfordshire? England, that part of the world where I have never ever had the opportunity to visit. And I love the feel of her channel. It's very calm, and she speaks very slowly, and at first I was like, okay, come on, get to the point. But the more I watch her show, the more I just absolutely love sort of the calmer pace of her videos. And what brought me to her channel is she recently put out a video of all summer tops that she had knit. So knitted lightweight t-shirts, tank tops, summer garments, and now I of course want to cast on all of them. So I got to get some things off the needles. So that is everything I have as far as knitting for you today. Let's talk a little bit of life here in Okinawa. Since I saw you last, I celebrated my birthday. And as I mentioned in my intro, my husband bought me a new camera. So I spent some time, exploring, trying to figure out this new camera. Early this morning, I walked down to the seawall and set up the camera down on the beach, and then kind of climbed up to the seawall and did some knitting while I waited for all of the creatures to come back out after I had scared them away setting up the camera. Unfortunately, I don't think I got very many good shots. I was trying to get these big fat mud skippers that live down on the beach. They're like huge, but they're really skittish. The little ones don't seem to run away quite as fast. It's probably because the big ones are smart enough to live long enough to be big. They know they got to be fast and run away from creatures like me. But unfortunately, a little white cat decided to creep up on them while I was trying to film. I think she was looking for a little bit of breakfast, and made things a little difficult, but I did get a couple of shots, a little time lapse of me knitting while I was waiting for the critters to come back out, and a couple of the 360 shots of the little crabs in the neighborhood. We are preparing for a storm here. So I mentioned in my last episode that we get typhoons here in Okinawa. If you're from the US, so what is a typhoon? A typhoon is exactly the same thing as a hurricane. I think it's just a different word for it. I grew up in Florida, so I'm very used to hurricanes. I do find in Florida, hurricanes tend to be heavier rain. Here, they tend to be heavier wind. So the winds just get really, really crazy hard. And sometimes we don't get that much rain, but it's just everything is blowing sideways. I think it may be a little bit of a blessing that we don't get that much rain. What I remember growing up in Florida is this downpour of rain would happen, and then the wind would come. And at that point, the ground would be so saturated that just all the trees would lift up and fall over. And so here we don't seem to get that much rain ahead of time. We also don't have as many large trees here. I don't know if it's a climate difference or a space difference, like maybe it's just so urbanized here, there's not much opportunity for large bits of trees. So, yeah, I mentioned that last episode. Since that episode, we've actually had 2 near misses on typhoons. We had 2 storms kind of roll by us, but didn't get close enough to cause any damage. There is a huge storm out there that's supposed to be hitting us Monday or Tuesday. And actually, I'm kind of excited to get some shots of the storm for you guys, but it looks like I'm going to be at work for this one. So where I work in the hospital, when there's a large storm, they call the staff members in that are supposed to work the next couple of shifts in case the weather gets too bad that we wouldn't be able to come in and, you know, do our job. I can't stop taking care of patients and shut down the hospital just because we have some bad weather. So maybe I'll be able to get a couple of shots. We do have a nice giant window on our unit where we can see all the weather happening outside, and maybe I can convince my husband to set up a time lapse or something down in our courtyard. So wish us luck. We've never had really big issues here. I think I've mentioned before that this is my second time living in Okinawa, and I'm just thinking back. So last time I was here, we had some storms, and I remember like dumpsters rolling down the street, cars getting picked up and rolled, which sounds really impressive, but you do have to remember that this is Okinawa, and a lot of these cars are little key cars, so they're like a fraction of the size of the cars that I'm used to in the US, but still windstorms that would pick up cars and roll them down the street, and motorcycles and things like that. So I always have to think carefully about where I park my little car when I go into work. I found it means I have to walk through the rain a little bit farther, but there's kind of a little corner in the parking lot where there's a break in the wind, and I hope that my car won't get, you know, rolled down the hill. So I guess that's all I have to say about typhoons. So yeah, this is our first typhoon season, our second time living here in Okinawa. We do live in a much lower area, so I'll be interested to see if we get much flooding. Thankfully, we have this courtyard behind me that sort of acts as a windbreak from the outside to our large glass windows that I'm hoping no debris end up flying through. So yeah, on the to-do list this afternoon is to go downstairs and start typhoon prepping the yard and pulling all the planted pots into safety and all the patio furniture so that it stays where we want it to stay and doesn't end up in the neighbor's yard. Yeah, I guess that's all I want to say about typhoon season here. Hopefully next weekend will see me safe and sound, and I'll have some cool footage for all of you to enjoy. All right, last but not least, I do have some acquisitions. I'll not be able to show you, they're not in my hands yet, but I can show you pictures from the website. I have pre-ordered the advent calendar from Sweet Georgia Yarn. I am so excited because every year I see all of the YouTube channel, knitting channel people opening all their little advent calendars, and I always seem to miss the orders for them because it's August. Why would I have to order advent stuff now? So when I saw the Sweet Georgia YouTube pop up talking about her calendars for this year, I just like hopped on it and bought one right away. And it's really cool because this year she's doing a little bit of a different thing. So you can actually go see what yarns are going to be in your calendar right now, and you can pick like the cool color tones or the warm color tones. So I picked the cool color tones, and then the advent calendar is going to come with 3 different patterns, and so you can kind of pick which pattern you want to work on, and that's going to be your mystery. So every day you're going to get a new bit of pattern instruction, so you can just pick it up and knit one day's worth of instructions with each of those yarns. So I am super duper excited. Of course, you guys won't get to see the results of this until, you know, December timeframe. I am still expecting my last installation of the Amirisu Yarn Club. That should be coming next month, and it seems like it comes right at the very last day of the month, so hopefully I'll have some fun fiber content for you there. Otherwise, I am gonna stick to a little bit of a yarn diet. I've gotta just finish the things I have before I buy more stuff. So that is going to be it. That's all I have for you this week. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this little mini episode, and I will see you again next time.